Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
If we're going to grow this country, Matt, some of it's obviously going to come out of tech and tech for the future. How hard is it to grow a company on a tech basis in Australia?
I mean, well, you're exactly right. I mean, we have natural resources in this country to be able to make anything. We're the world's largest producer of iron ore. We're the second largest producer of gold. We're, I think, fifth for nickel. Cobalt is up there. Gas, you name it. We've got everything. But what we do is we just basically pull it out of the ground, stick it on a boat, and ship it overseas. And in some circumstances, it just gets resold before it gets elaborately transformed into higher-end products. We have to as a country. I mean, but that alone could make Australia the richest country in the world. In fact, in 1900, we were the richest country in the world. But there's a lot more we could do by actually elaborately transforming these raw materials into higher end, higher value products. Technology is one part of that. I think manufacturing is really where we should focus as a country, which has been falling off a cliff for decades. It's about 1/3 of the OECD. At about 5.39% of gross value add is where we are with manufacturing, which basically puts us on par with somewhere like Liechtenstein, which is a financial haven. Technology has its part. It's still very small. We do have some examples of companies in Australia in tech that have become world leaders. An example is Atlassian. Another example is Canva, and so forth. In my company, we're trying to build a mini Amazon of services with Freelancer. So we have 3 companies within the group. We have Freelancer, which is the world's largest online crowdsourcing and freelancing marketplace in the world. It's effectively the world's largest online workforce with about 75 million people in it. Any job you can possibly think of, from a $10 job to a $10 million job you can get done. I also have a payments business called Escrow.com, which is you can think of it like PayPal, but for very large and complicated payments, in the range of tens of thousands to $100 million. And I run the largest heavy haulage trucking freight marketplace in the country called LoadShift, where we do about 400,000 kilometers of freight per day midweek, which is about the same distance, well, a little bit further than the Earth to the Moon. So, I am very much in the middle of trying to build a very, very large technology business, trying to build the Amazon of services. And let me tell you, I mean, there are some advantages about building a business in Australia, and then there's some quite a number of disadvantages. I mean, we're a very, very small market away from the rest of the world. We have limited number of people we can draw upon to help build a business. The experience and the skills here, while growing over time, because there have been a couple of waves now of Australian technology companies. It is relatively hard to draw upon experienced talent here. It's very, very difficult to attract it from overseas. You would well know in your business.
Absolutely.
And the markets are overseas, right? For my business, Australia, I think last time I looked at the numbers, is somewhere between 4, 5, or 6% of the total revenue of a company. So you've got, from day one, you've got to be thinking overseas and attacking global markets, which is kind of tough here, particularly in the US market, where even to this day, for the most part, unless you're on what I call the Silicon Valley track, where you're raising billions and billions of dollars and really trying to knock the lights out, the US investors and US businesses do look down on Australian businesses. So you kind of need to, when you do go into other markets, you need to kind of walk like a duck, talk like a duck, and act like a duck, and pretend to be an American business, not an Australian business. That having been said, it is a relatively stable place for staff. I have an office in San Francisco, and I will probably never, if I can help it, reopen another office in San Francisco ever again. This is, obviously this office will keep running, but it's a very, very tough city to run a tech company. I don't know how people do it. I've been running businesses in San Francisco for a long time, and you can't get people to turn up. They're overpaid, they underperform, and want to jump ship every 6 months with the next new trend that comes along. But I think Australia does breed good operators of businesses. I think that we traditionally have had because we've got all these adversities, we've got a challenge. The companies that do find it through the other side do breed very, very good operators. And that those wave of operators have started to see exits, and so you are seeing money kind of reinvested back in the industry, and some of those operators going on boards and so forth. So you are starting to see a bit of a support network being built here in this country and a bit of money kind of flowing to the country. So, it is tough. We're kind of building a freelancer on maximum difficulty because I'm trying to bootstrap the business and not trying to raise huge amounts of money.
So why are you doing it that way?
Well, I mean,
because like you said, you've got two choices.
Yeah,
So
a little bit of very, very brief history. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, sort of electrical engineer. I kind of went to Stanford, 97, 98, which is kind of serendipitous because it was right in the middle of the tech boom.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, I built a very complicated business in terms of technology. I built a semiconductor business that did high-speed pattern matching of network traffic, looking for things like viruses and content signatures at gigabit speeds. Yeah. And it was in a world where there wasn't really gigabit networking fully deployed. I mean, we're talking early 2000s where, the speeds were much slower, kind of in terms of commercial deployment. But ultimately, I went down the traditional VC sort of funded route with that business. Yeah. So you raise your Series A, you raise your Series B, you raise your Series C, you raise Series D.
Yep.
And then you look around, you go, Jesus Christ, why do I own 5% of this business? And why do I have to assemble 16 people to a board meeting?
Yeah.
And why can't I make any decisions anymore? And it's a little bit like a boiling frog because there's all this mythology that's been created in Silicon Valley about how you should grow a company. But that mythology has been created by, I think, the venture community in a very self-serving way. All these things about, grow the pie, don't think about, what percentage of the company you own, grow the pie, raise more money. And, it's a win-win scenario. Well, if that was the case, then why did all the funding documents in a VC financing tier and stratify all the classes of shares so that new money coming in from investors basically has control through, shares voting as separate classes and this, that, the other. So, and plus a lot of the VCs, they sit above the pond of Silicon Valley and they see kind of little tadpoles kind of floating around. There's a lot of survivor bias, which happens where, they jump on a company and invest in it after the kind of, the tadpoles come out of the pond. So the whole mythology about, put 4 people in a room and feed them noodles and pop out the other side and build a $1 billion company, a lot of that's kind of self-serving because they've been watching, all the tadpoles dying and, maybe one crawls out the other side and then they fund it and becomes a $1 billion company and so forth. So, after all of that, I thought I'd actually build a company and try and do it the proper way, which is to try and bootstrap it.
Okay.
By basically raising money from the best place possible, which is to sell something useful to customers in terms of a product or service. Mm-hmm. So with Freelancer, which I started around 2009, what people
started out of Australia instead of the US?
I started in Australia.
Was that deliberate in that sense?
It was deliberate to incorporate here, deliberate to start it here. Although from day one we'll focus globally. But I raised a total of $1.5 million before going public. And used that money to just buy a small operating business out of Sweden called getafreelancer.com. And didn't raise a single cent of operating capital. The money I raised was purely to buy that business. And after 4 years of execution on that, and kind of the revenue was growing at a very, very phenomenal rate. We listed in 2013 on the ASX, and it actually opened at a $1.1 billion market cap, which is the third biggest opening in the history of the ASX. And that was off the back of a $1.5 million fundraise. So don't think many people have done that. But
no.
But of course that came with its own challenges. So I guess one point of that is that the ASX can be a very good market for people to go to with their businesses. As the US market is you need to have a very, very large business now to list in the US. There's a lot of cost involved, a lot of complexity involved, et cetera. And while it can be very attractive for tech companies to ultimately get there, it is a very, very complicated path. But the ASX was very accessible. And for very many years in the life of Freelancer, we had a very high share price in terms of multiple compared to kind of where the operating business was.
Yep.
But it has been a bit of a roller coaster, and over that time, businesses that are trying to bootstrap and are trying to make money by selling something useful to customers, as opposed to raising gobs and gobs of money and trying to knock the lights out from a revenue perspective, do ultimately get punished. And right now, our share price is not in a great place, but the business is probably in the best place it's ever been. We've got 3 great operating businesses, all very strategic and unique in their own perspectives, and world leaders or market leaders.
Are they all first to market? Like what was
no, I wouldn't say the first to market. In fact, I don't think you really want to have first to market advantage. I think first to market advantage is a little bit of a fallacy, because in many ways you want to be last to market. First to market has to boil the ocean in terms of changing consumer behavior to adopt a new product or disruptive product or service, right? And if you think about kind of many of the large technology businesses that are out there, I mean, many of them were last to market. I mean, Google effectively was the last to market in terms of search engines. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
The only reason why, and in fact, the Google guys were at Stanford when I was there in 97, 98. In fact, I only started using their product because I kind of took pity on them because they were Stanford guys and they didn't have a lot of people using their product initially. And the second thing was that when the page loaded, back then you used modems to kind of connect to the internet, and all the competitors like Alta Vista and Excite had big banner ads at the top of the page. And so when you kind of tried to load the page up, it had to kind of choke on the banner ad before it would load the rest of the page up. That's and they didn't have that. So the page was very, very fast to load. And so it was actually quite easy and quite nice to load. But they were kind of last search engine to market. In fact, Ron Conway, I think, only put money into them in Silicon Valley Angels, I think one of his funds, because he'd just crystallized some money out of the Ask Jeeves IPO. Yep. And he thought, well, if these guys are any good, I can make a good money based on the returns he got out of Ask Jeeves. Microsoft was pretty much the last paid operating system to market. When someone actually came along and launched an operating system which is paid since Microsoft, very few. I mean, Facebook was one of the last, social media companies to market. I mean, you had Friendster and all these other companies that were, had come out before with social media platforms prior to Facebook, which ultimately became Meta. There were some things that popped up, like Instagram and so forth, but they were more of a photo sharing site, I think, more than a social media platform when they got acquired, and so on. And so, in many ways, you want to kind of be last to market. In many ways, you want to kind of, if you're in a car race, you want to kind of slipstream the guys ahead of you and let them kind of raise all the capital and kind of burn all the money up, trying to boil the ocean, changing consumer sentiment and attitudes and so forth, and getting adoption going, and then kind of learning off all the people, all the early entrants to kind of to then overtake them later on. So I think there's actually many advantages in being later to market than first to market. And I'm sure many people, maybe listening to this, who have done startups, who have come up with very innovative ideas, will probably resonate with them. They come up with something completely new, and they've got to educate the market on how to on this new approach, and maybe it's a good idea, but maybe the idea is a bit too early for market. I mean, when you're running these companies, you often think that you're far too late. You always, there's always maybe a small competitor somewhere in the world that you think, oh, gee, I'm too late. For example, with my last business, Sensory Networks, we were producing gigabit chips. We thought we were too late to market back in the early 2000s. Now we realize way too early, like way too early.
So, what do you put this? As you said, you've got 3 operating entities at the moment.
Yeah,
you're happy where it's at?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What's the magic ingredient then?
Oh, well, I mean,
and I'm sure it's one of its
there's
hard
a lot
work,
of magic.
But what is it? Now, you're coming out of Australia, as you say, there's a lot of against the chance of being successful. So how did you make it successful?
You need to do a couple of things. You need to hire people smarter than yourself, right? Because you're doing a lot of things at the same time. I mean, Freelancer effectively is really one of the first countries in software. In a way. I mean, we have an economy. We have people posting jobs every day. We have people working in jobs. We make decisions about, what should be the minimum, rate for a particular job, particularly in a particular industry. We have a rudimentary financial system. People get paid through the business and earn money. We have a rudimentary legal system with things like dispute resolution and arbitration. We have a rudimentary, police system of running the site in terms of making sure there's no bad actors and so forth.
Yes.
So it's really an economy in a way. If we're all kind of ranked globally in the world in terms of GDP and in terms of countries, we'll probably rank 180 set of our 193 countries or what have you. So So it's really about with Freelancer. It's all about what are the institutions and structures that can cause nations to survive and flourish. You've got to have basically you've got to make it super easy to be able to for people to work together. You've got to make it super easy for to really get things done, and you got to have faith in the system that people will reliably get paid and can really dedicate a lot of time to growing their business on the platform. I mean, we've got people who are on the platform for 20 years who have gone from 2 people in a room to 7 digits a year in terms of revenue, who are in the middle of nowhere in India because they've just persevered on the platform and managed to build up 2,000 or 3,000 feedbacks over a consistent track record of excellent delivery. And so, it's pretty amazing. So, the trick here is to really it's very early days in the online services space. In the online product space, in 1994 was the year that gigs had email addresses. 95 was the year that your grandma had an email address. So the internet really went mainstream in terms of consumer adoption between 94 and 95. And that led to the emergence of businesses wanting to sell things on the internet. You had a big .com boom.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that led to global marketplaces of products such as Amazon and Alibaba, or eBay, and to a lesser extent, or to a slightly different extent, Shopify, which is really a marketplace of products. When services is significantly harder to deliver over the internet. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that it can be very subjective. You get a website built, you like it, the tech guy hates it, the marketing guy loves it, your wife hates it, etc., and so forth. So they can be quite complicated. The other is that the more you consume a service over the internet, the more you, as the client, places a cognitive burden upon themselves to actually manage the engagement. So, for example, I can hire a web developer. I've now got to manage them. I've got to hire a copywriter. I've now got to manage them. I can hire a marketer. I've got to manage them. Now, I can hire those people very quickly within minutes. But now, the more people I hire, the more people I'm now managing. And there's a limit to the span of control that someone has in terms of their ability to effectively manage people and manage relationships more generally in terms of not just the people that report directly to them, but their family and their colleagues and their friends and so forth. There is a limit to effective interaction. So you've got to make it as easy as possible to get things done and really provide a sort of a support layer around collaboration and managed services and so forth to make that super efficient. But I think ultimately you're going to find, and it's very early days in the space. I mean, we have about 70, 80 million people. Our competitors have maybe the closest competitor is probably about 30 million people on their platform at this point. And the one after that's probably a bit less than that. So
what do you got, 70 to 80 million?
That's right,
people?
Yeah.
So engaging on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, per month, we do about 2 million projects per year, roughly, get posted on the platform. There's about 1 million people per month, participate in contests. There's a bit more than that participate in bidding on jobs, etc. So it's very, very active. There's millions of people on there, kind of interacting. But the trick is you've basically got to in the future, every 5 billion people on the planet need a better job. So 5 billion people are on $10 a day or less. And on my platform, the average job size is about $300. So just with access to the internet and the computer, you can access an opportunity and a better life for yourself, but through working in technical jobs that may otherwise be unavailable to you in your local area online. And then every business in the world needs to get things done. And you've got cost inflation around the world everywhere in every market. But one place you don't have it is really in Freelancer. We're a hyper competitive marketplace with access to talent all around the world, and you only pay for someone when you use them, right? So you'll never fire someone if you find a great freelancer, because if you tap into them just in the cloud, you kind of pay for them as you kind of go. So what we're working on is really making it as easy as possible for any business, large or small, to be able to get things done through tapping into an online cloud workforce on demand. And the smallest project running on the site today is probably $10, and for that, you could post a contest to get some design work done, and you'll get hundreds of entries in a very interactive sort of way, which is pretty amazing. And if you haven't tried it, I encourage you to your listeners to give it a go. The largest thing we have right now on the platform, we have a whole program in our enterprise side of the business where we work for Fortune 500 globally. And with NASA, for example, we have a $10 million innovation contest right now for gene editing in the central nervous system of humans, where we have all the large research institutes and universities like Yale and Columbia and so forth participating, as well as large research houses to basically come up with innovative ways to do gene editing in humans. So,
right, okay.
So we do at the very high end, we do a lot of breakthrough innovation challenges or moonshot delivery, as we call it, for large enterprises. And we've done things like for NIST, we've developed a heads-up display, a hardware heads-up display using augmented reality and virtual reality for first responders to go into bombings and earthquakes and this, that, the other. For the astronauts in the space station, we've designed the smartwatch they use up there. We've done the heads-up display for underwater spacewalk training for the astronauts and so forth. Everything from next generation water precipitation measurement devices for the Bureau of Reclamation through to speeding up computational fluid dynamics simulations for river sedimentation. So you name it. If you've got a large organization, a large company, and you've got some very, very tough challenges that you're trying to solve that you can't figure out how to do internally due to inertia or due to access to skills, we have the largest workforce in the world tapping into every type of service provider, whether it's large, small, whether it's academic, whether it's research, whether it's hobbyist, to deliver innovation breakthroughs for any organization.
So where's the future for it now? Like you said, you've done some very exciting stuff. What's coming over there?
Well, yeah. So there's quite a number of things. So the entire platform now is being turbocharged with artificial intelligence. So for a start, all the freelancers now have their skills supercharged. So you could be an average copywriter, and now with GPT, you're an exceptional copywriter. You could be an average illustrator. Now with Midjourney, you're an exceptional illustrator. The big thing that's about to happen that's absolutely huge in this space is there's going to be a Midjourney moment for software development. So as GPT was to copywriters and as Midjourney was, Stable Diffusion was to designers, this is about to happen for software development. So the nature in which software development gets done in the next 12 months is going to radically change, where you'll be able to, the productivity is going to go through the roof with orders of magnitude. It's going to democratize access to development. So anyone in the world is going to make it. It's going to be incredibly accessible for them to be able to build businesses. You'll potentially, it will be like a chat-like interface. So you'll be able to just chat to the tooling and be able to get software developed.
Yeah, right.
And and with the assistance of freelancers, actually get that fully commercialized. The complexity at which you'll be able to operate, at the moment, about 30% of our jobs on Freelancer are, build me a website. About 30% are something to do with design, and there's a very, very long tail of 3,000 categories right through to electrical engineering, product development, manufacturing, astrophysics, you name it. But you will be able to go to Freelancer and say, I want to build a business. I want it to be, like an Uber for pets, like Uber, but different. And then we have all this technology that's running right now, which will help break it down into, okay, well, for that, you'll need a website and you'll need a app to be built, and the app will need to be targeted for these particular platforms. And by the way, you might need to have a marketing campaign to launch it, and you'll need a support team built. And one of the really big things that it's about to happen in the space, and we're going to be the center of this, is how I told you before, in 94 was the year that the geeks had email addresses, and 95 was the year that the grandmother had an email address, and every business wanted to be an internet business. And so you had the whole .com boom. Well, what that meant practically from a business perspective is every business needed to have a website. And so this whole industry of website development was spawned, and you either got a one-man band to build a website for you, or a small agency, or a large agency, or Deloitte, right? And today, that's a very, very big industry. We aggregate all those providers on our platform. It's about 30% of the volume of what we do. But it was a huge wave where every business needed to transform and build a website. There was a second wave of transformation that happened years later with the smartphone coming out. So you had iOS and you had Android, right? And then people thought, okay, we need to have apps on the phones, et cetera, and so on. That became a big wave, not as big as web development. It's about, I think it's 16% or so of the jobs that are on our site today. The third big wave that's about to happen right now is going to be AI development. So there is when you kind of follow all the activity that's happening, whether it's OpenAI or whether it's what Google's doing or whether the startups coming out of Y Combinator and so forth, is a lot of it's heading towards what they call agent development. And what that is having AI basically perform tasks or roles of humans. And the starting point for that is going to be customer support. And we have this deployed on our site at the moment. It's pretty amazing. But basically having an AI agent either in a chat-based form or a audio voice calling form or a streaming video form.
Right.
And we have all three working. The chat stuff is deployed on our site. The rest we've got in alpha or beta, depending on what you want to talk about it. But you'll be able to have an AI agent, for example, answer a phone call, take an order from a customer, process a credit card, and initiate that in your backend systems. Or it could be a restaurant. Answer the phone, take a booking, put it in the calendar, and off you go. Or a hairdresser, answer a call, take a booking, put it in the calendar, and so forth. That is going to be a gigantic space. AI development it touches on all facets of a business, whether it's support, whether it's sales, whether it's back-end operations and so forth. And where are you going to go to get it done? You're going to go to the same place you get your website built. You're going to go to the same place you get your apps built to get these agents built, which is going to come to Freelancer. And it is going to be absolutely transformative. What we've seen immediately from having these agents deployed on our marketplace is that, first of all, they are the conversation. You immediately look at it, and it's far more empathetic than any human would ever be. Customer support agents typically have KPIs set, so there's certain maximum call time, handle time that they've got to have on a call. There's so many tickets they've got to process a day. Yep. In some circumstances, say 100 tickets per day, et cetera, and so forth. And so they don't have the time or the patience to be able to get through, no matter how good they are as a customer support agent, to be able to go through and give you a completely tailored, empathetic response to your particular question. The AI can do that. So the AI, tapping into the appropriate knowledge base and history about your account and so forth can be incredibly empathetic and have infinite patience. And as a result, the conversion rate of many activities is substantially higher than could ever be with a human. So I've got a classic example. On my site, we have a team of people who actual people in the Philippines that used to sell you a blue tick on your profile for verified. So if you go to Twitter or you go to Facebook, some people got a blue tick next to their name. Typically, these things cost about $99. Our team used to do about 100 to 200 reach outs a day. You'd get about 1 to 2% conversion rate on that. And then you ultimately sell a couple of those blue ticks per day, per agent. You deploy the AI, immediately you could do 50,000 reach outs a day with a 15% response rate, right? And now that's actually going to 50,000 an hour, right, in terms of reach outs. So and then you look at the dialogues. The agents can speak in any language. They've got infinite empathy, infinite time to talk to you about your particular use case, which could never happen before. And so it's the productivity that businesses will get out of these agents being deployed on the site is going to be absolutely phenomenal. Whether it's and you think about every business in the world, effectively in the West, if you're in the US, UK, Canada, Australia. You probably have someone on your staff, if you're a small business, whose job is to answer phones, process a credit card, take a payment, take an order, answer some questions on customer support, take a booking, right? So this is going to be a very, very, very big space, and you can come to our site today and get these things built and deployed, and it's going to be absolutely phenomenal in terms of the wave. And then there's all the other things you can do with AI and so forth. But this is the really big one that's going to start any day now.
And the focus on AI at the moment, has it been more on efficiency as opposed to growth?
So on the efficiency side, there's some pretty amazing things as well. So in the customer journey, or what they call a customer funnel, so that's traffic hitting, for example, your website, reading your page, maybe interacting with a form, completing the form, ultimately putting a credit card in, buying a product or a service, etc. That's kind of that journey. AI offers you the ability to personalize that journey with tremendous uplifts through the funnel. So, for example, on Freelancer, when you post your project now, the AI knows about all the different ways that people do things in the world and can help tease out entropy from you to fill out your project description. So, for example, in the past, you might say, I need a website built for my shoe store, and you'd leave it at that, hit submit.
Yep.
With the AI, it will just continue to ask you questions about, well, what sort of, is it an e-commerce site? Where your customers based? Tell us about your products. What sort of pages do you want on your website? Do you want it to be, mobile responsive? Whatever it may be, and we'll help you actually complete that with a lot more detail, which dramatically improves both the conversion rate of the client as a customer, as well as the success rate of ultimately getting the job done. But AI can do more than that. It can take that and write a technical specification based upon that. It can then break that down to a series of tasks. It can put that in effectively a tracker for you. It can act as a project manager to kind of oversee the whole thing. There's just so many things you can do with it. So that whole efficiency side of AI is pretty amazing. And there are some businesses starting to kind of deploy that. You'll see that in some experiences that you kind of you browse various sites on the internet, or you interact over the phone, or whatever it may be. But this is going to be a very, very big thing. And I actually think with AI, this is where the real opportunity is just transforming existing businesses using AI, much like old school bricks and mortar businesses transform with websites. Those website businesses will now transform with AI to become more personalized experiences. I think this is going to be the where the real money is going to be made in AI in the next couple of years. Is just a classic example. I mean, real estate agents hate the rent rolls because they've got people complaining every day about the taps, or the lock on the door's broken, or this, that, the other. Yep. With AI, you can deploy an AI agent to basically talk to all those people on the rent roll, take all their issues, go and find the appropriate service provider to go fix them, and that whole customer interface can basically be done by AI.
Now, how long are we talking about? How far away?
Oh, the technology is here right now, and in fact, it's actually fairly straightforward to actually implement and deploy. You don't need PhDs in machine learning or artificial intelligence to be able to get this work done. And in fact, my support team in the Philippines are actually the ones who are writing effectively the roles or the prompts to actually do that work, because they're the people that know best how to interact with the customers. So, in fact, my entire support team in the Philippines has become AI engineers in terms of writing prompts, coming up with new roles, deploying them, managing them, and then dealing with all the escalations, because there are some things that AI can do, and there's some systems that might not be able to access, and so you need to be able to escalate things like, okay, there's a credit card here you need to process. Can someone please run it through the terminal, as opposed to trying to get AI to do everything. So the technology is here now. In fact, it's actually very, very simple to implement that sort of stuff. And you don't actually need sophisticated, traditional, PhDs in computer science. It's just people interacting with APIs. It's interacting with APIs, and also then just having the skill base to be able to sit down and interrogate your staff in terms of how the job function operates now. Effectively, you write the job function up in a couple of pages of text. Literally, like you are a recruiter on freelancer.com. Your job is to help clients find the right freelancer for a project. You do this by looking through the following bits of data. You have the following information about the client. Based upon that knowledge, you want to make sure there's at least 3 recommendations for an effective match. Make sure that you highlight with each match the features that make that particular service provider interesting. For example, they may be have done relevant work which is recently, which is very similar to the work that's trying to get done, or this person might have a very high rating in terms of feedback, or this person might be the low-cost option, or whatever it may be. But that's as simple as it is. You simply write out these effectively role descriptions, and then you just need software developers, just normal software developers, not PhDs in machine learning, to stitch it all together with the APIs from all the platforms that are out there that offer voice support or real-time streaming. So whether it's retail.ai offers APIs for effectively interacting with the telephone system. HeyGen offers APIs for real-time 4K video streaming, and so forth. And you just basically stitch it all together and deploy it, and you get freelancers to do it just like you get them to do it with your website or your app.
Thanks for watching the No Limitations podcast, brought to you by Blenheim Partners, board and executive search firm. As a trusted advisor, we work with Australian listed groups, multinational corporations, large private companies, and social impact organisations on their most critical people choices to drive change, prepare for growth, and outperform their peers. To learn more about Blenheim Partners and executive search, visit our website, blenheimpartners.com. And now, back to the show. Now, the other two businesses, you want to talk through those? Give us a bit of insight. What you're trying to transform there?
Yeah. So we're in labour payments and freight, which are all services that businesses need. So Escrow is a payments business. It's actually been running for quite a long time. I acquired it in 2015, but it was started by Fidelity in 1999. It was funded by SoftBank, about $30 million in 2000. And actually it spun out in an IPO in about 2000 in a business unit with other businesses as a subsidiary of Fidelity, and spun back in 2001 with the crash. And ultimately I plucked it out in 2015 and have been operating it. It's a payments business, but it's a payments business for large value transactions or complicated or sophisticated transactions. And probably the best way to explain it, I know you've got many listeners in Australia, but if you buy a house and you want to pay for the house, how does it happen? Well, it basically goes into effectively a trust account. All the documents will settle, and once everyone's completely happy with the transaction, the funds get released. Yep. And that's effectively what we do. But we open that up in a digital way to many different industries. So we're used for the buying and selling of boats, cars, airplanes, jewelry, gemstones, diamonds, import, export. M&A of businesses. We do a lot of domain names. We do a lot of, we just did a $50 million IP address block for a large $1 trillion technology company. We do mineral rights. We protect payments for oil and gas. We're in two oil well marketplaces for buying and selling oil wells online.
Yeah, right.
And effectively what we're doing is we do large value payments, primarily going into platforms now that don't have payments. Right, you've got a lot of payment options to buy things that you hear about every single day: PayPal, Venmo, Afterpay, Google Pay, Apple Pay, etc., and so forth. But they're all for micropayments. The average transaction size for Apple Pay is $23 US. The average transaction size for PayPal is at $64 US, etc. All those digital payment methods that you hear about every single day, they're all built upon a debit card or a credit card. So you get your PayPal account, you stick your debit card in, or you stick your credit card in. Same with Afterpay, same with what have you. It's all kind of layered on top of those existing cards. Your listeners might be surprised to know that if you take that entire digital wallet space, it's only 3% of US card payments by value. So it's only a very, very small percentage of US domestic payments by actual value. It's high by count, but it's low by value because it's all micropayments. And if you take all the card volume that's out there, you take Amex, you take Visa, MasterCard, et cetera, and you aggregate all together, that's only 8% by value of US of US payment volume.
Right. Okay.
The reason why is because e-commerce is only about 11% of US domestic payments. The vast majority of payments don't happen through things like wire transfer or ACH and so forth. So we effectively are opening up very, very large value payments. So we deal with, if you can pay with a credit card something up to $5,000, no problem. $10,000, maybe you'll think about it. $20,000, maybe you'll look at the fee and go, is this appropriate, or will the merchant want to take a $20,000 card payment? But when you get to $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, all those payment methods break down. And so we effectively provide escrow for large value payments or complex and sophisticated purchases. So we're the only payment method in eBay Motors, for example, in the US. If you buy a car on eBay, you've got a choice. You can either turn up in person with cash in your pocket and kind of risk it, or you can pay through escrow through us. In Australia, we power Flipper. So if you want to buy and sell a website or buy and sell apps or buy and sell a small startup, you pay through us. In the US for acquire.com, if you want to buy a larger business, you pay through us. When Facebook rebranded to meta.com, Facebook paid for that domain name through us, as well as the trademarks.
Okay.
We also did uber.com, snapchat.com, instagram.com, wechat.com, crypto.com, binance.com, you name it. We just sold a domain to Elon this year, but we do hundreds of millions of dollars a year of domain names. We do IP address blocks, which are effectively the telephone numbers of the internet, which happen in large value blocks. For example, we just did a $50 million block. If you buy a large business, you want to basically put the funds into trust or to escrow until all the documents settle, and you want to make sure you kind of everything's transferring across. We do that, and so on. So it's a pretty unique asset. We're licensed all throughout the US, every single state, in Australia and in Canada. And we have licenses pending in New Zealand and the UK. About 55 financial services licenses. And we do roughly about $1 billion a year of volume through that business. It's pretty amazing.
And the third one?
Third one is freight. So every business needs freight, and we focus at the moment on Australia only with this business. The rest of the businesses are global, and this is we run the largest heavy haulage freight marketplace in Australia. So for mining, industrial, and construction, we move the heavy machinery on the roads you see on the freeways. It's primarily trucking freight, but we do other forms of freight, but it's primarily trucking. We've done 800 million kilometers of freight to date. We do about 400,000 kilometers a day midweek.
So how does it work?
So it's basically Freelancer. It's the Freelancer stack.
Yeah.
So we bought the largest bulletin board in the country for freight, and we merged it into the Freelancer marketplace. So on Freelancer, you sign up, you post a job, people bid on it. You put the money in, we hold the money, job gets done, money gets released, you leave feedback. It's exactly the same on Loadshift. You post the job, I want to move a grader, I want to move a crane, or I want to move, a car. People bid on the job, the money goes in, we hold it, the service gets delivered, and then we release the funds and you get feedback. So it's literally running on the Freelancer stack, which we've had live for some time, and the model's very, very similar to Freelancer. So we charge the buyer 3% commission, and we charge the seller 10% commission. So in the freight side, the shipper pays 3%, and then the driver pays 10%. And we do work for Newmont. We did work for Sydney Metro. We do stuff for in grain. We do stuff. We do a huge amount of machinery. We do movements for Port Longyear. You name it. But mining, industrial, construction as freight in Australia, and that business will go global. Not in the next 12 months, but soon.
How do you build, and how do you attract, and how do you lead?
Well, I'll talk about the people side, right? I mean, I mentioned earlier, you always want to hire people that are smarter and better than yourself, right? I mean, we're building a small country with Freelancer. We're running a large global payments business. We're running a marketplace for heavy haulage freight. So one day that we're moving the largest boat by land in the Southern Hemisphere in history on a 122-wheel trailer. Next minute, we're doing gene editing in a moonshot innovation contest for NASA and the NIH. And next second, we're helping someone with a website or delivering an AI agent through the Freelancer platform. So there's a lot going on. So when you have a lot going on, you need to have people who can effectively take charge of things. So my company values, I did not come up with these values. I got the values through polling the staff, where I said, what things do we hold sacred within the Freelancer group? What things do we cherish and value? And then I asked a second question, which is what's taboo? What are things that we repulse us, et cetera, and so forth? And all the answers came in from around the world and from the staff. And they coalesced really into five values, right? So I didn't come up with these at all. The first was take charge, right? So we're constantly looking for people to take charge of things and kind of run things and show initiative. And I think anyone could say that at any stage in your career, if you show initiative and you take charge of something, that's highly valued, highly valued. Take charge. What does the data say? Make sure that when we make decisions that they're backed by data, that we actually look at the data rather than kind of use our gut assumptions and things. What can I improve today? So having a process of continuous improvement and it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer or whether you're in customer support. There are always things you can improve today, right? And so forth. And then the fourth was I kind of hacked it from the responses into something that Reid Hoffman has as one of his values, which is effectively, we're not a happy family, we're a pro sports team, which is, I've worked with my mum and my sister before, and God knows I never want to do it again. You can't fire your sister. But, people feel really excited when they come into work every day and they're around smart people and they're learning things and it's exciting, right? And they feel like they're being intellectually nourished by the people around them, and they're kind of, and so on. So that was one thing that coalesced from all the staff, was just they love coming to work and just learning from people, because they feel like the people working for us are effectively athletes. You want the A players on the bench. You want to come into work and you want to feel like this is amazing. And then the fifth, which kind of surprised me, the fifth company value, which came from all the frontline staff who do interact with customers every day, was change lives.
Yeah, I like that one.
Because we literally change people's lives. You can be in remote part of Bangladesh, and if you got access to a computer and the internet, and that may not be your computer, it may be at a college you go to, or it might be an internet cafe or a friend's or what have you. You can access a world of work that provide you opportunity and income in highly skilled technical jobs. You can start off with unskilled and then kind of build your skills up over time. To basically help companies all around the world produce products and services of the future, right? And so we've got all these amazing stories. If I go through, there's about 10,000 testimonials on the website, and you browse through for like Saved My Life. There are so many testimonials, which surprised me, and also it's not something a marketing team could ever make up, where you've got these freelancers saying, look, I don't know how I found your site, but that was 10 years ago, and let me tell you, I couldn't feed myself back then, and now I have a small business. I have people working for me. Maybe they've got a car. When I go visit some of these countries, I get told, I've got a wife because I can afford the dowry and so forth.
Yes.
And some of the stories are absolutely incredible, right? So really, we're creating opportunity on both sides of the equation. We've got freelancers around in primarily emerging markets who are creating amazing products and services and building their skills and opportunity income. And you've got all the companies that use us, whether it's a small business, a startup, or a large enterprise, who are actually delivering the products and services of the future. And we scale up from the very, very simple, whether it's just a small business trying to get something done, right up to, we work with, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce, NIST, CDC, NASA themselves, et cetera, to do very high-end moonshot innovation programs as part of our innovation challenge.
What about the when you set up, and as you say, you're going to scale quick, but you bootstrap this time as opposed to the first time around was VC. And at VC, don't they always encourage you to give out equity fairly early?
Yeah.
And whereas bootstrap may be a little bit different, or is it not?
That's right. So when you bootstrap, you're raising money from the best place possible, which is by selling something useful to customers and so forth. Bootstrapping is typically a lot slower. So we can probably talk a little bit about how Silicon Valley does things and so on. So it's kind of interesting that Silicon Valley is the whole mindset is around trying to knock the lights out with a revenue number. So the way this works is if you grow your revenue, if you grow your revenue year on year at a very, very fast rate, you can attract a very, very high multiple in terms of your enterprise value divided by sales, right? So if the faster you can grow that revenue rate, the more ludicrous the valuation is you can achieve. And there's a whole reason why this has kind of evolved. One is that because venture capital funds have got larger and larger over time, and the reality is, with the exception of most software businesses don't need a lot of money to be able to operate, right? Like there's no capex typically in a software business. It's headcount and rent. Now, that's a little bit different in AI. In AI, you do have these large training runs now, which can cost $100 million, $200 million in order to train the next version of a foundational model for artificial intelligence. So there is in some, and if you do hardware, that can suck down a lot of money. But the typical software business doesn't need a lot of money. For example, if you look at like an Uber, to actually build an app where you can go, track cars, et cetera, and so forth, that doesn't really need a lot of money to actually run that business. Now, you can turbocharge it. You can turbocharge that. In fact, you can go to Freelancer. You could build an Uber on Freelancer for a few $1,000s. In fact, I built an Uber for photos called Photo Anywhere, and it works on an Android and iOS and so forth. And you can basically put in an address and enter in the world. It will kind of find a photographer to tapping into the Freelancer user base to try and take a few photos and send them back to you. Right?
Oh, okay.
It's a proof of concept. So you can do that for a few $1,000s. But you can turbocharge the Uber model by throwing out billions of dollars of incentives, right? So you can, for example, for drivers to sign up, you can pay them a set amount of money. For each ride that they do, you can pay them a set of money to get them super enthusiastic about, the service. I know for a long period of time, for example, even in Australia, everyone was getting $20 of Uber credit to catch an Uber, right? So you can really turbocharge these models by burning a lot of money. Now, VCs love that because they get the ability to put more and more money into these businesses, and their funds have got very, very large. I mean, venture investing obeys a bit of a power law, which is when you invent, it's not like being a fund manager where maybe across 10 companies that you've invested in, you can get maybe a 10, 20% return. And if you don't like it, you sell out of it and you buy a new company, et cetera, and so forth. And generally across your portfolio, you might have a relatively similar distribution of returns. With venture investing, because you're investing in illiquid private companies, where a lot of them have, they're coming up with brand new products or services that you've got to boil the ocean, as I mentioned before, to try and get consumer behavior to adopt. A lot of those businesses will donut. They'll literally go to zero. Okay. Right. So with the power law in venture investing, you typically need one company to return the entire fund in order for you to make any money at all. Maybe a couple other companies might make some sort of return, and the rest will zero. And so it's all about swinging for the bleachers, right? It's all about, swinging the bat as hard as you can and try and knock the ball right out of the park. And so that's why you see these, and the flip side of that is, you also see some very strange behavior nowadays in the tech industry where, people, promising the world in terms of what they can do because they're trying to play up to this, raising a ton of money, justifying a large valuation and swinging for the fences, right? Yeah, so you see this whole WeWork behavior, and you're starting to see it a little bit with OpenAI, et cetera, where I think they just raised money at was it $150 billion valuation or something ludicrous like that. And so the very nature of it is that you've got the VCs like to throw huge amounts of money at companies. In order for the company to be able to digest that money, it's got to have a really, really high valuation. And so you see this whole unicorn phenomenon where $1 billion companies, you see very early stage companies with no revenue, you're receiving $1 billion valuation. Are the companies really worth $1 billion? The answer is no. They've just synthetically created it through financial engineering. There's a little bit of a trick here. I mean, if you're interested, I can tell you how the trick works, right? The way the trick works is in Silicon Valley is if you get a Bloomberg terminal and you in normal market conditions, and I'm not saying today is normal market conditions, but maybe back in 2013 when you had all the tech industry going crazy, if you do a scatter plot of revenue growth rate year on year on the x-axis and enterprise value to sales on the y-axis. So simply that is what if you take the current year's forward revenue and what is the multiple that a venture investor that a market based investor is willing to pay on that revenue based upon the revenue growth rate year on year. The way it kind of generally worked out is if you draw that scatter plot, there was kind of a bit of a linear relationship, which meant that, the more that your revenue grew year on year, the higher the multiple someone was prepared to pay for your business, right? Because they put it into a DCF and they'll kind of work out the numbers, et cetera, and so on. And the way it kind of generally worked out was that if you grew your revenue at 40% year on year in terms of the growth rate, in normal market conditions, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, you would get about 10 times multiple in terms of your revenue. So what I mean by that practical example is if your revenue is $20 million this year on a forward basis, and that grew 40% year on year from last year, you might get about $200 million valuation in the markets. So I'm talking the public markets. So what the VCs did was come along and find those businesses and go, okay, well, you would be valued if you went public at 200 million. It's unlikely that you would get public. The most likely route for a venture-based business is to sell on a trade sale, not to actually go IPO.
Yep.
But how about I give you $100 million investment and I give you $1 billion valuation, right? And you can be a unicorn and you'll have a lot of money in the bank. And the reason why the VCs could do that is because they could financially engineer terms in the back end of the term sheet, things like liquidation preference. So the way liquidation preference works is, the VC says to you, well, you're a risky company. I'm going to give you $100 million. If you IPO'd it today, which I think it's be unlikely for you to be able to do that, you probably get a $200 million valuation because you're doing $20 million in revenue. But I'll give you $100 million to try and really grow it massively. And I'll give you $1 billion valuation because I'm giving you $100 million, and that's a lot of money, and it's quite serious. If your company sells and doesn't manage to go IPO, I want to get all my money back first, and then we share. Right. So, for example, if you end up selling the business and it sells for only $100 million,
nothing
right?
left.
Then I get all the money and first because I put the actual money in. You just put your sweat equity in, and I put real cash in, whatever.
Sure.
If it sells for $200 million, okay, I get my $100 million back, and then we share in the proceeds. On a as if I converted to common stock or ordinary stock, and effectively. What you could do is you could do things like you could say, okay, well, I want a 2 times liquidation preference. So if I put $100 million in, I want twice my money back, and then we share, right? And if you think about that intuitively from that particular example, the VC knows that business is worth $200 million because he knows that the public markets will pay for that, which probably means in the trade sale we can probably find a way ultimately to get someone to pay $200 million for that business. Mm-hmm. So if I get $200 million minimum, no matter what, effectively my downside is protected, and then we can kind of give them $100 million, see if they can knock it out of the park, get them to spend all that money, and just really try and see if we can pump the numbers as high as we can. So effectively, you had this emergence of this whole unicorn phenomenon where you had these VC funds trying to stuff more and more money into these businesses. They'll give them huge amounts of money to grow because it's very, very hard to give. In the olden days, it was very hard to give a software business more than $20 million. Like it was very, very difficult because there's no capex. And so effectively what would happen is the deal would be the founder effectively turns their equity into a call option, right? Because below a certain value, they would get nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So they turn the equity and in exchange for fame, because you're now a unicorn, you're now on the front cover of these newspapers and Wired and whatever, because you're the next billion-dollar unicorn, right? Now, some circumstances it worked out. Some circumstances it worked out really well, right? They ultimately built a big business. They had the $100 million they used to, they really turbocharged revenue, and they kind of got there. But in a lot of circumstances, they flamed out, right? And it doesn't matter how much money you give a particular business. Some businesses just don't have the right product market fit to make them super successful. But you had this whole phenomenon where effectively tech businesses get funded huge amounts of money at huge valuations. In order to justify those huge valuations, they're going to come up with very ludicrous promises to the world. I can't remember what the WeWork vision statement was, but effectively they were finding office space, painting the walls, putting up wallpaper, putting ping pong tables in, and putting beer taps in, and then try, it was borrowing long and selling short sort of thing. To selling office space to startups that were that frequently blew up, didn't have very good cash flow, and but loved the ping pong and loved the beer taps, right? So, but the crazier the idea you pitch to Silicon Valley, the more interested the VCs are, because the VCs need to put huge amounts of money to work, right?
Okay.
So what that has done in the tech industry, perversely, has created really an environment where people do raise huge amounts of money, really try and swing for the fences, take huge risks, and really provide huge subsidies to their customers in order to try and get the business growing. I won't mention the business name, but for example, I saw a thing in the Sydney Morning Herald only a few weeks ago where for every dollar spent on the company only made 50 cents in revenue, right? And the philosophy in Silicon Valley would be, we'll make it up in volume.
That's right, yeah.
Which
But do they attract the better people for doing it that way too, Matt, or not? As opposed to the bootstrap philosophy, where it's a bit harder.
Yeah, you can.
Am I tying you into a dream, or what am I doing?
You can. The funny thing is, they do it. There's a lot of shenanigans that happen with stock options. Right?
That's right.
So you come in and you promise imagine joining OpenAI right now. Right, you could come in. They could go, because it's now turning to a for-profit company. I don't know how they managed to do that from a non-profit, but whatever. So you could come in today, and they could give you some option package with lots of zeros in it, and you would look at that, and the average person in the street would look at that and not be able to value that properly, not ask the right questions, and think they're going to make an absolute fortune. But any call options that are issued at $150 billion valuation, the value of OpenAI has to go up substantially if you make any money whatsoever.
That's right.
But they could throw a big salary package at you. They could because they raised $6.5 billion or whatever the number was just recently. It's the biggest raising in history. And they could give you some option package that synthetically looks great, but in actual fact, if you don't ask the right questions, you won't really understand how it works out. But that's why you really have this whole amongst in the Silicon Valley itself. I'm not talking about Australia, but in Silicon Valley, the executives are moving between the companies all the time, right? And some circumstances, the tenure at a company might only be 6 months before they go to the next company. It's very, very hard to keep and attract staff in the US because the next hot thing comes along. You join Meta, or join Uber, then you join Meta, then you leave Meta, you go join OpenAI, then Anthropic comes along, you join Anthropic, and people are jumping between companies at a tremendous rate.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I mean, the funny thing is about all this option stuff is in the history of me running businesses, and I've hired several thousand people, and we've handed out options and this, that, the other. Only 2 people have ever asked me. Nobody has ever really asked me, give me less cash, give me more stock.
Haven't they?
No.
Okay.
Except for 2 people. One person, because I told him about another person doing it. And then nobody has asked questions like, well, what's the fully diluted capital base of the company? Do you have any liquidation preference? Are there any ratchets in the business? On a fully converted basis, what does that actually mean? What percentage of the company is it, et cetera, and so forth? Nobody asked that. Not even Silicon Valley executives asked that question. There's a lot of fantasy football being played, at the top end. But you can play that game, and you can play that game quite well, if that's the game you want to play. But it's all swing and a miss, and really trying to really hit the ball out the park. If you try and bootstrap a company like I'm doing, you do get punished. You get punished for a few reasons. One is because it takes a lot longer to bootstrap a business, because you don't have a lot of capital just flushed. If you raise $100 million, you can hire anyone. You just throw a salary at them, right? You can incentivize customers to buy your product. You see a lot of Silicon Valley companies. They raise $1 billion. Well, let me backtrack. You raise $100 million, you pump it into marketing, you make back $150 million. You show a big revenue ramp. You raise $250 million. You pump it into marketing. You make back $220 million. You raise $500 million. You don't pump into marketing. Make back $400 million. You raise $1 billion to get the marketing. Make back $600 million. Right? Because as you kind of juice the market like that, you are acquiring more and more marginal customers over time.
It's almost Ponzi borderline too.
Yeah, it is.
Like that.
It is. Yeah. But that's generally how the market's working. And then what you're trying to do, what the VCs are trying to do, is they're trying to make your company look really, really attractive from having a large revenue growth rate, so they can go to the big tech companies and go, well, if Google owned this,
that's right, and
with your distribution, this is what you could get, right? Or if Meta owned this with your distribution, this is what you get, right? And look, sometimes it does work out. But that's the game. The game is just to pump things to the sky, and so on. So yeah, you can. It's a bit easier to hire people.
So why didn't you go down that route?
You
had a choice, obviously.
It's because I actually think it's soul destroying, to be honest. I just think it's just, I just I just don't think it's the right way to build a business, right? It works for some people, it works out tremendously well for some people, but I just don't think it's the proper way to build a business. The average business in the street is not doing that. The average business in the street is trying to generate a profit, trying to sell something useful to a customer, and so forth. They're not just surviving on, fantasy.
Marketing hype and everything else.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a member of a group of all the tech companies in Australia above 100 million market cap. We meet up every once in a while, whatever. And I look at some of these guys. Like there's this one guy. I don't know how much money he's raised. I think it's about $1.5 billion now. But he posted something saying, "I've just been on a bike hike for the last 8 months through Europe." And I go, how the hell do you get the time to go on a bike hike for months at a time? Like because they just raised money and they're just playing a game and it's more of a game of poker than actually building a real business. I mean the other thing if you lose by trying to bootstrap it as well is if you're public, for example, public in Australia, you need to have analyst coverage covering you, et cetera, and so forth. They take you around to investors and so on. If you're not raising, but there has to be a business model for the investment banks to actually support you, right? And so the business model needs to be either you do huge amounts of fundraising, right? So you're raising $1 billion at a time, and they're getting a fee every time you do a capital raise.
Yes.
So every time you see these analysts kind of push out a note on a company and raise the target price, et cetera, you got to look through that and go, okay, what's going on with the company right now? They're doing a capital raise shortly, or this, that, the other, and so forth. Or there's got to be huge flow for the desk, which means you've got to be a massively large, highly liquid company, like BHP or whatever it may be. So you don't get a lot of support from the investment banks if you're not raising gobs and gobs of money all the time. So that makes it also quite difficult. But ultimately you can get there. So ultimately you just got to keep your head down, focus on the business, and focus on the customer, and ultimately you get there.
Okay, so let's go back to the earlier question. So why do smart people join you?
I think if you go and talk to anyone who's worked for me previously, they will say that they probably learnt more in my working for me than they did anywhere else. I mean, for example, I had a guy who worked for me. He was Australia's #1 cash game poker champion. Actually, a very smart Chinese guy. And he had gone down a career of professionally playing poker, even though he got really, really good marks at university. He came and joined me. I put him in charge of something, and when you work for me, there's so much going on, and we're thinly resourced, that I put you in charge of something that's quite meaningful quite early in your career. And I do create I do train people extremely well, particularly in areas like product management. And he was with me for a number of years, and then he left and he joined a bunch of these rock stars. He joined Afterpay. He joined this company I told you where the guy went from the bike hike. He's quite a good career. And he goes, gee, I think back at the time I spent at Freelancer, and I really learned how to do things, and you've got weekly reports that go out where people are analyzing all this data and statistics and this, that, the other, and so forth. He goes, I go check the weekly reports of the company I'm at now, and it's like, which sushi restaurant does Fred like to eat at? Because the product is not a sophisticated product. It's maybe some sort of checkout solution or what have you, and it's really just a sales driven organization. They're just trying to find the next customer. I think they generally learn a lot, and in fact, a lot of CEOs have come out of people who've previously worked for me. Like I counted 17 at Sensory Networks, my last company I ran. At Freelancer, there's a lot of people running businesses all over the place.
So your engagement style is it you want to be up and presenting all day long? You're sending emails, you video. Look, out of interest, how do you inspire? Do you paint a vision all day long? We keep repeating that vision.
Well, I think you have to do that. I think you do have to. You have to set the vision, and you have to repeat yourself quite frequently in terms of what the mission is to get. The statement is to get to the vision. But I run a very transparent business, so everyone in the company can see all the stats. There's 40,000 graphs in the dashboard in real time you can access. we actually have a thing called Brains, where you can actually, if you learn SQL, you can actually go in there and query the database and actually figure things out. So anyone in the company can actually, even a junior engineer can figure out, for example, understand the business and contribute to things. And a lot of businesses, nobody knows what's going on in the business until they kind of see something in the newspaper.
Yes.
I foster a collaborative culture. I mean, every Friday, every team, will send a report of kind of what they've done to everyone else in the company, so everyone kind of learns off each other. So I think it's a highly transparent, highly collaborative environment. And I just try and find great young people and train them up and really support them to the best they can be. Really.
Okay. All right. And look, just finishing up, you mentioned 3 companies to start with: Atlassian, Canva, and yourselves. Now, the first 2 have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Is there much else coming through?
Yeah, there is actually. We've got, despite a tough environment, and I think because of the tough environment, I think we do breed great operators of businesses. So I think the people that do come out the other side from being able to survive, running out of Australia, they're fantastic, right? So people like, Patrick Grove, who did Catcher Group, Rosalind Kogan, Kogan.com. You got Craig Scroggy now is running around the world, the biggest rock star in the country right now, building data centers around the world, right? Because there's an infinite demand for AI, and that's leading to infinite demand from data centers. And he's every few weeks he's got another $1 billion order for another data center, right? I mean, there's some problems. Some problems are that these data centers consume 300 megawatts of power every time you turn them on. So he's building them through Asia. If you want to build too many more in Australia, like a power plant, which you'll consume all the available supply in the grid, right? Yes. So we've got to fix the energy problem if we're going to have data centers and AI in this country, or otherwise it's looking to go offshore to Asia, right? So we do have good entrepreneurs in this country, and there's been now a couple of waves of that. Luke Anir from Safety Culture, this at the other, Didier from Culture Amp, Mel and Cliff from Canva. There's plenty of them out there that are actually doing great things on the world stage at scale, and they're coming and they're starting to contribute back to in the form of going on boards. They're starting venture funds. They're funding companies, and that's what you want. You want great operators to help with the next generation coming through. So it's getting there despite things. Okay,
Matt, if you look back at that young man going to Stanford all those years ago, what advice would you give him now?
You never. You live with the choices you make, and I just wish I'd did everything faster. That's all. You kind of look at things and execution. You just want to do things a lot quicker.
On that, Matt, it's been a really terrific opportunity to meet you today.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You've been listening to No Limitations.